We have a new guest joining us in the studio today. President Jeremy Udell of Udell Associates is here to talk about long-term care with us. Welcome to the show. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a pleasure to be here.
This is something I have thought about, and so we get to talk about it today. Tell us about long-term care and who needs it. Does everybody need it?
Well, there is a stupendous online resource that I use a lot called longtermcare.gov. They have a fascinating statistic right on the front page of the website that talks about who's going to need long-term care. If you reach age 65, there is a 70% chance you will need some form of long-term care before you die.
That's pretty young.
Yeah.
Not too young to start thinking about the process.
Right.
So again,
it's just basically saying that if you reach retirement, probably need to start thinking about long-term care if you haven't already. The earlier you start thinking about it, the better.
Okay.
But if you reach age 65 and you haven't planned for it already, you probably need to start thinking about it.
Okay.
It's a big risk and can cost a lot of money.
very, very good point. I'm wondering how many types of long-term care are there, and can you explain those to us?
I can. In fact, when I talk about long-term care, the first thing that comes to most people's mind, nursing homes. That's what they remember. That's where they've been to see their grandparents when they were getting sick, if they lasted that long. And they think about being bedridden, and that's the type of care I'm worried about most. And they should be. It's very expensive, but it also tends to be the shortest duration of care that people need. And bluntly, of the people who need care, only about 30% will need a nursing home. The other forms that people need are sometimes an assisted living facility. That's where you start to need some help with your care, and so you move it into an institution. May come in and help you do some things you couldn't do, like feed yourself or go to the bathroom, get dressed. And they'll come in a few times a day, but you're still largely independent in those situations. And there's also home care, where you can stay in your own home, but someone will come in to check on you. Maybe they'll stay there for hours on end. Maybe they'll just come in a few times a day for the things you need to get done. And lastly, this is great for those kids who may be taking care of a parent who needs that type of care and can do it on the evenings and on the weekends, but may be working like a lot of us are. There's adult daycare centers, a little like a child care center where you drop them off and pick them up. This way, that parent or aunt or uncle, whoever you're taking care of who needs that type of care, can get it when you're not there, but it doesn't cost you round-the-clock dollars.
And the beauty of Udell Associates is that you give people individualized information. So you structure whatever it is that you're presenting them with what they need based on their income.
Well, we talk to them
care.
about their family situation, who's likely to possibly provide that care for them if they were to need it. If no one is there to provide them that care, where would they look for a facility? Would it be back north maybe where they originally lived, or would they stay here? Is there another area they'd be looking at, maybe where a kid moved to? Who knows? But we would be talking to them about all those things and helping them maybe do a little research on what's in that area and what the costs are of all those different
And that was my
care.
next question. Obviously, the costs that are involved, do they vary, and how do they vary?
Well, they certainly vary from region to region. Sarasota costs more than Orlando or Jacksonville. Florida costs more than perhaps Iowa, something in the middle of the state. But at the same time, within the types of care, there are also nursing home, as I talked about, tends to be very expensive, $8,000 to $9,000 a month, depending on where you are and if you're doing a semi-private room or a private room.
And where does that money come from?
The money can come from a lot of places. It may come from your personal savings if you have no other place to take from. Government programs can provide some of that. Specifically, Medicaid can cover a lot of it, but you have to spend down almost all your other money, have very little in the way of consistent income coming to you. There are exclusions, such as your home, up to a certain amount may be excluded from the assets you need to spend down to qualify for Medicaid. And by the way, even if Medicaid will cover some of your expenses, if you're in a facility, but the facility doesn't have Medicaid beds when you need Medicaid coverage, all of a sudden you may have to move when you're really not up to a move. And that could be a big problem. Finally, there are long-term care insurance policies that a lot of people are buying these days that can provide the coverage that will really help protect some of the assets that you already own and provide the care you need when you really need it.
Okay. So when someone comes in to see you, say I came in to see you, is there like a list of questions that you ask me? Do you have me fill out forms and tell you what I'd like, what I don't want, or do you go through that with me? How does that process work? You do a one-on-one consultation with people?
Every client is different. Some people come to us just for long-term care. And if that's all you're coming to me about is that question, then one of the first things I would talk to you about is what assets do you currently have? If you weren't going to reserve for it with a long-term care insurance policy per se, where are the assets going to come from, and how long could those assets theoretically sustain you?
Exactly.
Especially if you're going to be spending them in the meantime to live in retirement. And let's talk about what your expenses are in retirement to figure out what will the drawdown rate be if there is a drawdown rate. Maybe you're living very humbly and actually your assets are projected to go up over time. Maybe you don't need a long-term care insurance policy, or you don't have much assets and you are close to the Medicaid level, in which case we could talk about you may not be able to afford anything at this moment, but there's a good chance if you needed care, you'd quickly get down to the Medicaid level, and I would inform you of that, and we would go from there.
How long should people expect to plan on saving for these expenses, these type of expenses?
Well, if they're going to be saving for them, they should probably be putting away a little piece of their income every month to reserve specifically for that expense. And by the way, as they get older, it should be in a fairly conservative type of portfolio, because the last thing you want is just as you need that care, a major market correction, and now you don't have as much just as you need to be drawing down big chunks of it. And those are the types of things that, again, we can help with. On the other hand, for the people who can afford a long-term care insurance policy, what you need to be worried about is your health and looking at it before you have a downturn in your health when the insurance companies won't cover you anymore.
Well, we've had a lot to chat about today. I know one of your associates will be back with us to talk about financial planning, and we'll learn more about what else you do at Udell Associates. Thank
Fantastic.
you for being here.
My pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to Aging Gracefully on Suncoast FYI. To find previous episodes, go to snntv.com under programming. See you next Saturday and Sunday at noon.